All right, folks, back on the Bossman show here with Jared Dubin here, CBS NFL reporter. Also, he's about to date for the NBA stuff. Jared, what's up, man? How you doing?
I'm doing well, man. Thank you for having me. How are you?
I'm great, man. Just trying to figure out why Jerome Boger, an Atlanta native, a Morehouse graduate, screwed the Falcons on Sunday in Tampa with Grady Jarrett just sacking the quarterback.
Yeah, I saw that Perry Fuel, who's like the vice president of officiating now, came out this morning and was like, "Yeah, we think that was a good call." The league basically will just never admit a mistake with these kind of things. Like a few years ago with all the pass interference stuff, they wouldn't admit a mistake with that. Then they came out the next year and were like, "We're going to make pass interference reviewable, but every time we review it, we're going to like purposely make the wrong decision so that nobody wants this anymore." I feel like they're going to do the same thing with roughing the passer next year.
No doubt, Jared. And since Al Riveron's gone now, who's actually over replay now?
I don't know who's in charge of replay actually. I know Perry Fuel is like the vice president of officiating, but I'm not actually sure who's like in charge of replay on game days.
Yeah, because I know that was I know I always knew it was Blandino, it was Al
Yeah.
Riveron. Now it's like, who is the guy? You know what I miss, Jared, is when we had Mike Pereira, but they were putting out videos saying this was a good call, it's a bad call. But like you said, it's like the league office now is like, we're not being anything. No, doesn't
I
no.
think they still do those on occasion, but this one was like a memo sent to the teams, I think, which I don't know. Like they just need to have someone on game days that's like in the booth or in the league office or wherever that very quickly says like, no, that penalty is wrong.
Yes, because let's be honest, Jared, with gambling being involved now, you need to have these calls correct. People's
Yeah,
money
I
on the
mean, some
line
of
right
it
now.
is like, you're going to get calls wrong every once in a while, but when it's like, when it's something that is just like made up, like, I don't know. It's like, oh, well, I thought this was a hold, but it turns out that he let go quick enough for it not to be a hold. Like, whatever, that happens. With stuff like this, where it's like a roughing the passer that is just a phantom call, or, a pass interference where a dude's feet get tangled, like, I don't know. It seems like it should be easier than the league makes it.
No doubt. And I told this many fans who are fans of the Falcons, this week, Jared. I'm not saying the Falcons win the game and score. We just give them a chance. They're gonna punt
Yeah,
the
I mean, some
ball.
of that is like, if you look at the play before, there should have been a pass interference, so it wouldn't have mattered anyway. So it's like I don't like to zero in on one call and say, this team wins or this team gets a chance. Like for the most part, calls come out in the wash team wise, even within the context of a specific game. But also, you can't get calls that obvious that egregiously wrong. Like they shouldn't have missed a pass interference on the previous play, and they shouldn't have called roughing the passer on that play. Like both of those calls need to be gotten correct. Like I kind of view the refs from my perspective as like an act of God. Like the refs are going to get calls wrong at some
No
point.
doubt.
Some of them are going to go against your team. Some of them are going to go for your team. Everybody thinks their team gets the worst of it. Everybody's wrong because every team gets screwed at some point. But like some calls are so bad and so obvious and seemingly at such a turning point in the game, like it's just as likely that a call in the first quarter could change the game as a call in the fourth quarter. But obviously, everybody notices the ones at the end more. But I think that's just even more reason to figure out some way to get this stuff right.
And Boger did it against Josh Allen in Baltimore the week prior. That call. So
Yeah.
Boger is roughing the passer kind of a guy. And so we need to have him. Hey, Jerome, this is what it is. What it isn't.
At a certain point, also, like Jerome Boger's been repping games for like as long as I can remember. Like so many of these guys have been around forever. Like I feel like you need some younger officials out there that can do the job a little bit better. But also then sometimes you get some of these young guys and it's like they're not experienced enough and they don't, know the rules as well or miss some things or think they see some things. Like it's hard to find a balance. But it's not a good situation, obviously.
No, that is what the Falcons roster. The Falcons are 2-3. Marcus Mariota is dating, is doing what he can, but Falcons, is rebuilding. We know that we trade Deion Jones away to the Browns 7 round pick to get off his salary, dead cap next year. So, what are your thoughts on the Falcons roster being 2-3 so far this year in its rebuilding year, and what you've seen so far from the Atlanta Falcons?
I think they're more competitive in a game-to-game situation than I probably expected. Like Arthur Smith knows what he's doing in terms of like creating efficient offense. I think that some of the ways that they're handling snap rates for key players, like Kyle Pitts was playing like 60-something% of the snaps in a couple of games last week. Drake London was like 65% of the routes or whatever. Like just have these guys out there on every play. The design of the offense is really good and gets more out of the talent than I think you would expect, especially considering the offensive line is, no great shakes right now. It doesn't seem like they have that many foundational players yet. Obviously, it's a roster that's not necessarily in good shape, and it's going to take a while to build. In the meantime, being able to get more out of the talent on hand than you should is pretty good because it gives you a sign that when you do have talent, you should be able to play well. But also, it's not as good because like you want a higher draft pick. I don't think Mariota's playing particularly well throwing the ball, especially these last couple of weeks. He's doing a good job for the most part of avoiding sacks and scrambling. He holds on to the ball a little bit too long. He's not necessarily going to create explosive plays on his own. They got to be schemed up for him. And so I feel like we have to see Desmond Ridder sooner or later because the Falcons are going to have to make a decision whether or not to draft a quarterback this year. But, in the meantime, like I didn't necessarily think we should have seen Ridder in last week's game because like the offensive line was getting kind of overwhelmed. He wasn't really going to be put in position to succeed with no Kyle Pitts out there. But at a certain point, I'm not sure when their bye week is, but I would try to get him in there because you want to be able to get a clean evaluation by the end of the year. And to me, that probably means he should be starting or at least getting a bunch of snaps sometime soon because I don't think Mariota's taking them for the playoffs, taking them anywhere special. But I mean, I'm not overly concerned about, this regime yet because they just don't have the talent really to compete at a high level.
Yeah, and they were really hamstrung by the cap and bad contracts. I think last warning was Deion Jones get rid of.
Mm-hmm.
I think they'll have a lot of cap space issues. I told some of the guys, that's how I feel. Like, look, if you're a Falcon player this is your chance to prove yourself to be worthy to be on this team next year. This is an open trial for you this year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I agree with that. Obviously the Matt Ryan dead cap hit is pretty big this year, the Deion Jones hit, but starting next year, you get a little bit more flexibility to build things out. Maybe you can, move off with some other veterans that you don't necessarily want to keep around. But the foundation of the team for the future is going to be, Kyle Pitts, Drake London, AJ Terrell, and you got to find out if some of your other draft picks from these last 2 years can be foundational pieces or if they're rotation pieces or if they're going to be guys that need to stick around at all. And then you want to go back to, the previous couple of drafts, the guys that are still on their rookie contracts and see which of those guys, you're going to want to give extensions, which of those guys you're going to want to move off of. That's sort of the phase that they're in right now. And there's nothing wrong with that. Like every team goes in cycles. Like 2-3 years from now is the time that you want to be really competitive and start being like, okay, we're going to be a consistent playoff team from here on out. And if it doesn't look like that's going to be the case, that's when you have to start thinking about like, all right, what are we doing here?
No doubt. As some of the fans here talking, we need another receiver. I might we'll have one next year in Ridley. That's another receiver we're gonna get. It's like add an free agent and kind of really next year. Like why are you all complaining about Zacchaeus and Edwards and Hodge? Like, look, next year we'll have Ridley to go with London and Pitts in the middle.
Yeah, no, I mean it's a good point. Obviously, you do need more than like 2 wide receivers to play. Arthur Smith is going to be a guy that uses more like 2 tight end and 3 tight end sets. So maybe not necessarily on his kind of team. You need 4 or 5 receivers, but we don't know what Ridley's going to look like when he comes back next year. At that point, he's going to have not played for a year and a half. Obviously, he's a really, really good player when he's on the field, and if he can recapture that, that's really good. But I don't think you should necessarily bank on like we've got 2020 Calvin Ridley out there along with Pitts and Drake London, like you do need to add something else to that mix to just to make sure that you've covered all your bases, I think.
No doubt. And I do feel like they should spend money on the O-line and free agency. I don't know who's available, but you gotta get the trenches taken care of too. So and that's been the problem in Atlanta for a long time.
Whoever the quarterback is going to be, like it's important to have not just the scheme and the play calling, and a couple of high level pieces at important positions. Like you got to build out the entire infrastructure. The interior of the offensive line, I think, is probably going to need to be built out a little bit more. I think Jake Matthews is a pretty good left tackle, but also at this point, he may not necessarily align with the timeline of the foundational pieces of the team. Not that he's old, but he could be in his 30s by the time they're really good. So maybe that's something you have to consider, a succession plan in the future, a couple of years down the line. But I mean, it's going to take work. It's not a particularly good roster, like you said. They have some cap issues, but they've got their draft picks going forward. Maybe they could get a couple more in there if they decide some of the more veteran guys aren't going to be part of the next really good Falcons team. Like, I'm not concerned yet. Like, this was always going to be a couple of year process to change the roster over.
No doubt, and I know Arthur Smith bristles against the word tanking or losing games, but business-wise, it might be best to do so. I know he doesn't want to do it, but I feel like you should want the highest draft pick possible when you're a team like Atlanta. But I know why he wants to win games with record, of course, and the team morale. But business-wise, I would tank per se.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be nice to set yourself up to get, like C.J. Stroud or Bryce Young or whoever ends up being the top quarterback this year. I know that different people got different opinions. I tend to not watch these guys until the couple months before the draft, just because I don't have the bandwidth for that yet. But we'll see. I mean, I think they're going to be in pretty decent position. Like, I don't think they're going to have like the 17th pick in the draft or whatever, where they're like in the playoff conversation until the end of the season. I think it's more likely to be, like around 6 to 10 range, 6 to 12 range, whatever it is. Just seems like the quality of the roster is not high enough for them to be picking lower than that. And it's not the best position to be in. You want to be at like number 1 or number 2 if you're going to get a quarterback. But also, there's some other guys out there, or maybe you could try to move up, or, we'll see what happens. But I feel okay about what they've been doing so far. Like, they've landed, I think, in the last 3 drafts, 3 like high quality players in the first round that are going to be foundational players for them. So that's a good sign.
Just with the NFC South to be so down with Carolina being this bad, of course, firing Matt Rule this week. The Saints 2-3 as well. You expect the South to be down the way it is with 3 teams, with two teams 2-3, and the Panthers 1-4, and the Bucks kind of not playing as well as they could either.
Yeah, I mean, I was not nearly as high as other people on the Saints this year. I just didn't see it with Sean Payton leaving and with Jameis Winston being the quarterback and that defense getting a little bit older. So I'm not necessarily surprised that it looks like the Bucks and then everyone else again. I'm somewhat surprised that the Bucks haven't been that good yet, but I think you can attribute almost all of that to their injuries in the first few weeks of the season. I think we've seen the last 2 weeks that they're going to look much better when they have, like Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, all these guys back on the field.
Yeah, Julio Jones is back to, being injured, not practicing.
Man. Like, I just want to see that dude play again. Like, he's so good, but just can't stay out there.
No doubt, man. So let me ask you this. We're going to NFL a little bit here with the Eagles. Did you see that 5-0 start for the Eagles? Did you think that hurts their quarterback of the future now, in your opinion?
I mean, I didn't see 5-0 necessarily. They got, I think, the second or third best point differential in the league too. So, it backs up them being one of the top teams in the league. I had them winning the NFC East like a lot of other people did. I thought they were going to be better than the Cowboys like a lot of other people did. Some of 5-0, like, you're not going to win every close game. So, they could be 4-1, they could be 3-2. That wouldn't change, how good they are as a team. I think certainly the way Hurts has played this year, he looks like he's going to be their quarterback for quite some time. And I think that they've done a really good job of what I said the Falcons need to do in terms of building the infrastructure. Like, they made sure that there was going to be no doubt in their evaluation of Jalen Hurts this year because they gave him a really good offensive line. They gave him two really good wide receivers in A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith, who they went out and got these last couple of years. They have a really good tight end in Dallas Goedert. They have a good scheme. They have a good running game. Like, whatever happened this year, they were going to know whether Jalen Hurts was good or not. And you need to be in that position when you're evaluating a young quarterback. And I think they've done a really good job of that.
And I'm shocked Ron Rivera threw Carson Wentz on the bus. That was shot quarterback. Like,
yeah,
that was.
I mean, I'm not surprised that Carson Wentz has played poorly enough that he's in position to be thrown under the bus. But I do expect sometimes Ron Rivera is a little more democratic, I guess, than that, or diplomatic, sorry, than that, usually. So I was surprised to see that too.
Yeah, and I'm like, Ron, your defense is trash.
Yeah, that defense, I thought it was going to be really good last year, and then they came out with probably the most disappointing individual unit in the league. Them were the Ravens defense, but that was more explainable by injuries. Chase Young still is not back, but they've got some other players there. Like Montez Sweat is good, Cam Curl is good, Jonathan Allen is really good. Like, they've got some players. They should not be this bad on defense. And but like, I don't know, Jack Del Rio is still their defensive coordinator. That guy hasn't been coaching good defense in like 10 years. So I don't know
No
what
doubt.
necessarily expect.
No doubt. And then looking at the NFC North, like the Vikings are somehow 4-1.
Yeah, I don't get
that.
that.
It's like they played like crap and got lucky, But it's like, really, the Vikings. I get Aaron Rodgers and the Packers struggling right now. Should have lost to the Giants, but the Giants is coaching. Hey, Brian Daboll this is just showing what when you have a good coach, what coaching can do for a team. Coaching
for sure.
got them 4-1, like, not talent.
It's a masterclass in coaching to your personnel. Like, he comes from the Bills. Their offensive coordinator, Mike Kafka, comes from the Chiefs. And this offense doesn't really look like either of those offenses because they don't have the quarterback to do that. They're running an offense that suits Daniel Jones. He's running the ball all the time. It's play action on like 40-something% of the dropbacks. Saquon is like the most heavily involved player, obviously, in the offense. Like, do I think they're a 4-1 quality team? No, obviously not. I'm pretty sure that they still have like a negative point differential or something like that. Like, they're not, they can't keep playing one score games all year and going 4-1. Like, that's just not going to happen. But being able to get better results than your talent level is a sign of good coaching.
Yeah, 100%. Masterclass in coaching, and I'm seeing like, I never thought this, Jared. I would see Geno Smith was actually playing better than Russell Wilson in Denver. Did they actually make the right call may have been keeping Geno Smith over Russell Wilson.
I can't believe it either. The Broncos are a mess, man, but I would much rather talk about what Geno Smith is doing. Like, some of it is somewhat unsustainable touchdown rates. Like, he's throwing like 7-8% of his passes as touchdowns, which just can't keep up. And they're like not running all that many plays per game. Their defense can't get off the field, so they have to keep scoring all these points. Who knows what the running game will look like now without Rashad Penny there, but he's playing at a really high level, man. It's not like he's getting lucky. He's making really good throws every week. Good for him. It reminds me, I guess, a lot of like Ryan Tannehill in Tennessee, where he was a guy who, wasn't particularly good as a starter, got relegated to a backup. Like, they brought him in for basically nothing, and then all of a sudden everything comes together in this 1 year when he's like 30 years old. And if he can keep it up, like, he's going to get a contract, like maybe not playing like, I think he's like third in EPA per play or something like that. I don't think he's going to keep that up. But if he's, 10th to 15th in the league, like, that's a good quarterback.
No doubt, because we've seen some bad quarterbacking already in this league already. And I will say this, Matt Ryan looks like he got old and slower overnight. in
Yeah.
Indianapolis. The line
Last
ain't
year
good
I
either,
wasn't.
but let's look at it older and slower too.
Last year I wasn't sure how much of his like big step backward was him not being able to either move or really get the ball downfield. How much of it was just the situation and the conservative nature of the offense for a lot of last year. It looks like it was probably a combination of both. He doesn't look good. But that offensive line in Indianapolis has been really disappointing, not playing as well as it has over the last few years. Like even Quentin Nelson hasn't been quite as good this year as he has for the significant majority of his career. The left tackle situation is a major issue. They've had their receivers out a couple of times, but he just looks cooked, man.
Yeah, and Mike Tomlin's gonna go his first lose season, in my opinion. He's depending on Matt Canada, who wasn't good in college as a coordinator. And
Yeah.
I know the other line there is terrible too, but you gotta we talk about day ball, scheme to what you have, quick passes that answer your running game, But Matt Canada's doing what Matt Canada does everywhere he goes, just not being productive.
Yeah, just keep running like 3 jet motions per snap. That'll work eventually.
Exactly. Like, what are we doing, Mike Tom? Get rid of this guy. So, and Brissett came down here to Atlanta, and blew it. Like Brissett, like he plays well for about most of the game, but he makes about 2 or 3 dumb mistakes. Like he could have ran that ball in for a touchdown,
He
or at least the
is like
first
a
down, at least.
backup quarterback. Like if you need somebody to fill in for a game or two, you feel really good about him. If you need somebody to start long term, you don't feel that good about him.
He proves it to us every freaking week. Every week.
And every spot he's been in too, in New England, in Miami, in Indianapolis, like we've seen the same thing. Like if you need somebody to like hold you steady for a couple games, fine. But if you need him to start for a long period of time, it's probably not going to work out that well.
No doubt. I got a couple for you, brother. Brandon Staley, that call on 4th down and 1. I think he's going to get himself fired doing this stuff eventually.
I would say like it's somewhat more understandable because their defense hadn't looked all that good, particularly in the second half. They had let Cleveland, march down a couple of times, and it's a situation where like I feel like it was closer to 4th and 2 than 4th and 1. So the models maybe didn't necessarily know that and recommending as strongly that they go for it. But in a situation where like if you convert, the game is over. It's a little bit more understandable than like a situation where if you convert, but you still need to do more to win the game. My thing is they call the same thing every time on these 4th and 1 or 2s. Like it's stick to one side and a slant on the other. And it's like you're throwing like a hitch route or a quick out or a quick slant against the opposing team's best corner every time. And the other teams know that. Like call literally anything else and I get it. But if they're going to keep calling the same thing and defenses know it's coming, you're dropping the odds of conversion from whatever you think they are to something much less.
No doubt. No doubt. It's so funny, seeing them do this stuff right here. And the hat I have on, last one got for the Raiders, the hat I have on today to match my nice black, just pullover coat today. Talk about that, man, McDaniels thing, man. So, going for 2 could have rather than tying the game up. This is the whole Josh McDaniels and Oakland experience, well, not Las Vegas experience so far right now.
Yeah, so I've heard it explained sort of 2 ways. The first is that, obviously you get the lead. So, basically, if you don't think you're the better team, then trying to make sure that the game ends in regulation, no matter what, might be an optimal strategy, which I kind of understand. Like the Raiders clearly were not the better team in that game. So going for 2 and taking a lead and being like, well, let's try to play some defense. And if Kansas City gets super aggressive and goes down and scores, then maybe we'll get the ball back for one more shot, which is kind of what happened to them, even though they didn't convert. So from that sense, I understand it. But if it was like, if you're going to do that, you do that with 27 seconds left, not 4 minutes and 27 seconds left. There's just way too much time for Mahomes to go down the field to score, even if you do take the lead. I do understand wanting to avoid overtime against that team, though, when you are not the better team. I just think it's much more of an optimal strategy with less time on the clock.
No doubt. Well, Jared, thank you for your time. We'll do this again down the road, but it was fun to talk football with you, my guy. Check out my CBS NFL writer, Jared Dubin, the Bossman Show. Be safe, brother. Talk to you soon, man.
Thanks for having me, man. Have a good one.
Anytime, brother.